just one whole being. In a certain sense, life itself is just one whole being. To flow out of oneself is really to give up the resistance. This is probably one of the most challenging things that life teaches each one of us, right? That the resistance to what is. By resistance, I mean a psychological, emotional, intellectual struggle with what is. To finally be able to let go of that struggle with what is a very, life seems to almost be perfectly constructed to show us that the resistance to what is doesn't work. And you can feel it in the energy, right? Even when I'm just talking about it, even simply through the act of describing it, you can feel it in the energy when the resistance starts to just relax a little bit. You can feel it. The whole internal and the external environment starts to change, starts to modify. Your mind relaxes, your heart becomes more open, you have a sense of an availability, kind of a subtle intimacy. And all this can begin to give rise to something inside you that's extraordinarily important. Which, as I said, it seems like most human beings don't have it really, which is just an instinctual, inherent trust. Not trust in something outside, not trust in a doctrine or anything you could put. Someone said, "What are you trusting?" It's hard to say what you're trusting. That you will know what you need to know when you need to know it, that you will do what you need to do when you need to do it. That everything will become clear at exactly the moment that it actually needs to become clear, and not 1 second too soon and not 1 second too late. All that stuff comes from a kind of inherent trust, doesn't it? But of course, I suppose that real trust is gained from experience, wouldn't you say? Otherwise, it's just sort of blind trust. Like I said, trust in an idea. But you do have to have enough trust to let go a little bit, to see if things can right themselves. I get asked the question, I'm sure every spiritual teacher gets asked this question all the time. Well, how do I know what the right or the wrong thing to do is in any given moment? Well, first of all, you have to stop asking what is the right or the wrong thing to do. The problem that anybody has with a question like that, or I have with answering it, is any answer that you provide to a question, how do I know what to do in any given moment? If you apply any standard, then you're not actually trusting yourself anymore, right? You're not trusting. It's sort of like if you went into an ice cream store. I'm sure that most of you trust yourselves very well to know that when you walk into the store and you start looking at the ice creams, eventually you'll know which one you want. You may want 3 different kinds at the same time, possibly, but you'll know which ones you want. You can trust yourself to know. You won't walk in there and be in the ice cream store for 3 hours not being able to figure out which one you want. You know that at some point you'll know which one you want. You trust, in other words, right? It's easy with an ice cream cone, isn't it? It's no big deal. Nothing rides on it, Your life doesn't hang in the balance of what kind of ice cream you choose, fortunately. Who knows? Maybe it does. But it is, I use as an example simply because it's so simple. You couldn't teach that. Imagine somebody didn't have that. Imagine somebody came from another planet and they said, well, when I go into an ice cream store, I simply cannot figure out which one I want. How would you tell them how you know which one you want? How would you communicate that? It would be difficult, wouldn't it? Something that to you is very, very simple, very obvious, very straightforward, but to communicate it to somebody that had no idea what you were talking about, who every time they walked into the store, they were just lost in confusion and conflict and fear that they might screw it up. What would you say to them, Of course, you'd like to say just, if you're not trying so darn hard, your body will kind of be inclined to one of the flavors or not. Don't worry about it so much, But, if that person thought a lot rided on it, it would be very difficult for them. But that's a kind of inclination, isn't it? It's almost an appetite, you could say. It's an instinct. That's why I always say the truest authority flows from one's direct experience. That's where the truest authority flows in your life, is from your own direct experience. Our difficulty isn't that we're having the wrong direct experience, it's that we're usually not paying attention to our direct experience. We're not encountering it vividly, directly. So here we are sitting here and all partaking of the literally infinite capacity of a consciousness. Consciousness can take every shape and form you imagine. Every feeling you have is a form of consciousness. Every experience you have is a form of consciousness. It's your consciousness changing and molding and altering itself. It's an extraordinary, fluid and dynamic thing, consciousness. Extraordinary. Its capacity is almost unlimited for human experience. All ideas about oneself and God and everything else are created in consciousness. All experiences are created in consciousness. Can't happen without it. And so often we're looking for the right kind of consciousness, the right experience, the enlightened experience of consciousness. That's like assuming that, if you had a palette of colors and you were wondering what is the right painting to paint with this palette of colors. There's not a right painting, is there? In a certain sense, to realize what we are thoroughly is to go to the very seat of consciousness itself, the inception point of consciousness. I don't know if you can sense this clearly. Maybe you can if you're not trying to understand it too much. But at this moment, there's the consciousness of, well, my voice, obviously you're hearing it, whatever you feel, the consciousness of your body, all of that. The various kinds of ways that consciousness displays itself in your own experience. And then if you're very attuned in a very subtle way, there's also a quality of consciousness that's undefinable. It's almost as if it's consciousness in its state of suchness, before it has become a feeling or a thought or a sound or anything else. There's a quality of consciousness that's continuously simply what it is. And this is what we miss when we keep looking through the various states of consciousness to get the right state of consciousness. We miss consciousness as such. In our manner of speaking, consciousness as such is what one is. The consciousness of things is easily noticeable. Consciousness of sight, sound, taste, feeling, all of that. It's immediate. It's taken in from your senses. It's, sight, sound, hearing. Those are all actually states of consciousness. The seeing state of consciousness, the hearing state of consciousness, the feeling state of consciousness, the tasting state of consciousness. All states of consciousness. All ways that consciousness experiences itself. And through all that, and right in the middle of that, is consciousness as such, which isn't a sound, which isn't a sight, which isn't something you taste or you touch or you hold. And as you begin to recognize that, it starts to unwind the great search. Because only then do you start to feel, you start to experience that consciousness as such, consciousness as a whole, is where we find our home ground. And all the states of consciousness are doing what they're supposed to do, which is flow and be fluid and be changing and altering themselves, including your spiritual bliss and your exaltation and all the various spiritual states of consciousness that everybody loves to hang on to. You know what I mean? Those extraordinarily addictive states of consciousness that you're absolutely certain if you could just feel that way all the time, then you would be in the state of liberation. All those states of consciousness. The problem with those states of consciousness is simply that they are also part of the flux and flow and comings and goings of consciousness. So the more you try to sustain any of them, no matter how exalted, you end up disappointed. Have you ever noticed? In the end, you end up disappointed. Not because you did anything wrong, but because consciousness is a fluid, dynamic thing. It's life. It's just fluid. It's dynamic. It's not stopped. When in spiritual teachings we talk about a sort of the unmoving, the unchanging, ultimate reality, what they're really talking about is, you could say, consciousness as such, not its various expressions, not its various experiences, but consciousness as such. Consciousness not only before, but even in the midst of its assuming a particular experience or a particular form. There's a quality of it that's still there. As I said, it's something you intuitively begin to sense. Consciousness as such, you can't see it, can you? In the same way you can't see your own seeing. You can't hear your hearing. You can't taste your tasting, because it can't be made into two different things. So there's a capacity within us all, within each one of you. It's an intuitive capacity. This goes back to trust again. It's intuitive capacity that everyone has. By intuition, I don't mean like, I think that the Niners are going to win the Super Bowl. I just feel it, and then, of course, they lose. Not that kind of intuition, like I know what's going to happen to you tomorrow, at 2:00. That's something different. By intuitive, I mean it's literally almost a different, another sense. In the sense we have visual sense, auditory sense, feeling sense. All these are senses, right? The way we take in the world. There is a sense organ that's actually distributed throughout the entirety of our being. The entirety of our being is actually one big sense organ. And so when I talk about intuitive capacity, I mean when you sense into the present moment with the entirety of your being. Not with just your ear or your eye or your tongue, but the entirety of your being. And that's like an intuition. It's a sense organ that's distributed from your head to your toes and beyond. That is what experiences unity and can sense it and can know it and can feel it. That's where spiritual wisdom or transcendental wisdom comes to you, kind of gets downloaded into you. It's by awakening that sense, that intuitive sense. That's why I constantly say what I'm teaching. Do you get the sense of what I'm saying? I often say that. Do you get the sense of it? Do you get the feel of it? Because the feel and the sense of it is much more important than the understanding of it. Much, much, much more. Have you ever understood something that you didn't really understand? I know that sounds completely crazy. You say, yes, I get that. I know what you're talking about. Yes. Okay, now what is it that you understand? I don't know, but I understand it. What we might really say is, I can't communicate it, or I can't think to myself about it. I can't conceptualize it even to myself, but I understand it in some way that I don't even know what that way is. That's when you're starting to use this greater sense organ. You're using this intuitive capacity that belongs to the entirety of your being. That's the thing that recognizes awakening. That's the thing that recognizes the unity of life. That's where it happens. It doesn't happen just in your eyes or your ears or your nose or your mouth or, When all those are working as one continuous whole, then you look at something, anything, anybody, and it's that intuitive capacity where you know that essentially, maybe not relatively, but essentially, you are them, they are you. It's one thing happening. That's what comes from this intuitive capacity. In Zen, it's called prajna, heart wisdom, but heart in this sense means whole. And it opens as soon as you try to grasp it. It seems to be gone. As soon as you relax into it, it starts to, almost like it comes online, do you know? Comes online. It's there, but it becomes online. It becomes available. It becomes operational. So it's just kind of like that. And everybody has it in them. Everybody has it in them. Everybody. There's not a single being that doesn't have this intuitive capacity within them. Okay. Let's open it up, see what's on your mind. Yes, my friend, we'll get a mic right next to you in a moment. You wrote it down, did you?
Well, I'm a little nervous, so. Otherwise, I was afraid I'd ramble on, which I may still do. Hi, Ajay.
Hi.
It's been a while. I had a question. I went and did a long retreat. I haven't done retreats in quite a while. I kind of gave up the search in a sense a while back, and realized that, as you said, most spiritual types are at least as afraid of life as they are of death.
Mm-hmm.
And that was certainly the case for me. So a number of years ago, I quit my dead-end job and kind of actually engaged life, which I've been doing for a while, and got my butt kicked a lot of times, and came back. So I was surprised when somebody mentioned a retreat at Forest Refuge back east, and the energy was behind it to go, which kind of surprised me. So retreats used to be kind of an escape from life, which was scary, and now it's kind of changed. So I'm a little more afraid of retreats than I am of life.
Pendulum swings, doesn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, I went back, and of course it didn't go according to plan, and I ended up getting kicked out after 2 weeks, which I don't know. That was a surprise. While I was there, I came back up from a sit at night now, and I was looking in the mirror. I was just getting ready to go to the shower, and my point of reference shifted. Mm-hmm. So this thing in the mirror, and all the thoughts, and the stories, and the fears, and everything was immediately seen as not me. Mm-hmm. So it was a huge relief.
I imagine.
It was a huge relief, and it was like, oh shit, that's not me.
Yes.
And of course that was me again in a few seconds, but there have been insights over the years, stuff that I've tried to hang on to, but I learned pretty early on that that's really kind of a waste of time to try to. This one feels different. Mm-hmm.
It is. It's different in the sense that, for the reason you just stated, that's not me.
So I kind of came apart a little bit at the retreat. I ended up having kind of a run-in with the teachers, not really teachers, but I just told them the truth, my truth, and they kicked me out. But I wasn't trying to. I just said, it's this perfect container of silence. It's just pristine, and everything is handled perfectly. And the only thing is they overlay this teaching, which kind of messed things up. But so I kind of came, started that kind of, and it's still there. Mm-hmm. I forced myself back into normalcy, but in a way, I don't. It's like I can't unsee it,
That's right. You can't.
And so I was I'm kind of. I don't know if there's anything I can do or should do, or if
about what.
I'm afraid of kind of slipping back into. It's like I don't want to go. I'm afraid of slipping into this, what feels like a lie.
Yeah.
And everything kind of pushes me into this direction.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, including, most of the teachers out there. It's their status quo. So anyway, I don't know, but it just kind of, I'm not sure where to go with it. I'm afraid of going back into my life, but that's kind of the direction, and maybe there's nothing I can do about it, or maybe there is, or maybe I don't want to do anything about it, because, the truth is kind of scary,
Yeah, it can be, especially if you see it as even the slightest amount other, as something you relate to. Then it can seem scary. Is it scary really, though?